They were never meant to be together, a contract marriage born from lies. But last night, love found them. And this morning, their secret is about to explode. Watch part 1 before you dive into part 2. The morning after their kiss, the apartment felt different. Heavier, yet strangely warmer. Florence moved about quietly, setting a bowl of fruit on the table, but her hands trembled slightly. Every time she remembered Jiho's lips against hers, her heart betrayed her with wild flutters. Jiho, freshly dressed in a crisp navy suit, leaned casually against the doorway, watching her with unreadable eyes. "You didn't sleep," he remarked flatly. Florence didn't meet his gaze. "Neither did you," she muttered, her voice soft but defensive. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. Then Jiho took a slow step forward, his voice low, confident. "Don't overthink it. What happened yesterday, it wasn't a mistake." Florence froze. The words should have reassured her, but instead, they sank deeper into her chest, making the line between their contract and her feelings blur dangerously. Later that evening, they arrived together at the Lee family mansion for a gathering. The air smelled faintly of polished wooden orchids. Chandeliers bathed the room in bright white light. Madame Hyjin sat regally at the head of the table, eyes flicking between Florence and Jiho with a sharpness that made Florence's stomach twist. "You two seem closer," Madame Hyjin observed, her pearl necklace gleaming as she leaned back. The faintest curve touched her lips, approval, but cautious. Florence managed a polite smile, though Jiho's hand subtly brushing against hers under the table steadied her far more than words could. And then she appeared. Eun-ji, radiant in a crimson silk dress, walked into the dining hall with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged. Of course, she did. Her family's wealth and history with the Lees ran deep. She was no stranger at their dinners. But tonight, her presence carried something sharper, something deliberate. "Eun-ji," Madame Hyjin greeted warmly, her eyes softening in a way they rarely did with Florence. "It's been too long. Sit with us." Florence's chest tightened. She tried to focus on her plate, but she could feel Eun-ji's gaze burning holes through her. Every laugh Eun-ji shared with Madame Hyjin, every subtle glance toward Jiho, carried a silent message. "I belong here. Do you?" Throughout the meal, Eun-ji's words danced dangerously close to the past. "Do you remember, Jiho, those late nights we used to spend at the River Cafe? The truth or dare games?" Florence gripped her fork tighter, her throat dry. She expected Jiho to falter, to look away. But instead, he set his glass down firmly and spoke, his tone calm but edged with steel. "That was another lifetime," he said, eyes locked on Florence instead of Eun-ji. "This is my present." The room went quiet. Madame Hyjin's brow arched, Eun-ji's smile faltered, and Florence's chest swelled with both pride and fear. For the first time, she felt Jiho claim her openly. But beneath that fragile warmth, an invisible crack began to spread, a secret neither of them could hide forever. Rain poured over Seoul that evening, blurring the city lights into streaks of silver and gold. Florence wasn't home. A group project kept her late at university. The apartment, usually warm with her presence, felt hollow. Jiho poured himself a glass of whiskey, scrolling absently through reports when the doorbell rang. He frowned. It was nearly midnight. On the doorstep stood Eun-ji. Her crimson umbrella dripped rainwater onto the marble floor as she swayed slightly, eyes glassy. "Jiho, I couldn't go home like this," she whispered, her voice trembling as though she had been drinking. Jiho's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't be here." "Please," Eun-ji murmured, clutching her umbrella. "Just tonight. I can't face my parents." Against his better judgment, he sighed. "Fine. You'll stay here until the rain eases. I'll drive you home after." She smiled faintly, stepping inside. But as Jiho turned to fetch a blanket, Eun-ji's gaze swept the living room, sharp and searching. Her heels clicked softly against the marble as she moved toward his office. It wasn't drunkenness, it was calculation. Moments later, Jiho found her already seated on the sofa, pretending to doze. "Sleep here," he said curtly, tossing the blanket over her. I'll be in the other room. But while he left her there, Eunji's eyes snapped open. Her lips curved into a determined smile. She hadn't come by coincidence. Earlier that evening, she had been drinking with one of their old friends, who had invited Jiho too. When Jiho declined, the friend had teased him. What, did your wife forbid you from going out? Jiho had only smiled politely, saying, no, she's busy with her school project tonight. I've got things to do as well. That single line was all Eunji needed. Florence wasn't home. And that meant opportunity. Whispers from mutual friends had already stirred her suspicions. Florence and Jiho's sudden marriage never made sense. And now, with Florence conveniently gone, Eunji had her chance. She slipped quietly into Jiho's study, her fingers trailing across the polished desk. And there it was, tucked between stacks of documents. A contract. Her eyes widened as she skimmed through the words, one new marriage agreement. A cruel laugh escaped her lips. So it's true. She didn't dare take the paper itself, but her phone flashed as she snapped a clear picture of every page. Slipping it back exactly where she found it, she returned to the sofa, arranging herself under the blanket like an innocent guest. By morning, the rain had stopped. Florence returned home, her arms full of books, hair damp from the drizzle. As she stepped through the doorway, she froze. Eunji was curled on the sofa beneath a blanket. Jiho immediately rose to meet Florence, his usually sharp expression softening at the sight of her. You're back, he said gently, reaching to take the books from her. Florence managed a small smile, but her chest tightened. Why was she here? Her gaze lingered on Eunji, who stirred deliberately, opening her eyes as though just waking. Good morning, Eunji murmured, her tone laced with false innocence. Florence's polite nod hid the storm inside her. She wanted to ask Jiho why another woman, and not just any woman, but that woman, was in their home. Still, she swallowed her questions, unwilling to create a scene. Yet the unease gnawed at her, sharp and bitter. Eunji, however, noticed everything. Jiho's soft gaze toward Florence, the tension tightening Florence's jaw. Jealousy coiled in her chest like a snake, but she masked it with a smile as she stood, smoothing her skirt. Thank you for letting me stay the night, Jiho, she said sweetly. Then, turning to Florence, she added, it was raining so hard. I had nowhere else to go. Florence forced a tight smile, her knuckles whitening around her bag strap. I see, she replied, voice calm but cool. When Eunji finally left, the silence she left behind was heavier than the storm had been. Florence placed her books down carefully, her back still turned to Jiho. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. Florence, it's not what you think. She didn't answer, only kept adjusting the books as though they might break apart in her hands. Jiho exhaled, running a hand through his hair. She showed up out of nowhere, said she couldn't go home. I told her she could stay only until the rain stopped, nothing more. You know me better than that. Florence finally turned, her eyes searching his. And you didn't think to call me? To tell me she was here? I should have, Jiho admitted, guilt flickering across his face. But I didn't want to worry you while you were out working so hard. The truth is, his voice softened. The only person I want in this home, the only person I want beside me, is you. The tension in her shoulders eased, just slightly. She looked away, fighting the warmth rising in her chest. Jiho stepped forward then, gently brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. No one can take your place, Florence. Not Eunji. Not anyone. Her lips trembled, caught between doubt and hope. She wanted to believe him, and part of her already did. Later that week, Florence received a chilling message. It was from Eunji. A single photo filled the screen. The marriage contract, captured in brutal clarity. Meet me, the text read. Alone. Florence's blood ran cold. At their meeting, Eunji leaned casually against the railing of a rooftop cafe, her phone in hand. You should leave Jiho, she said smoothly. He belongs with me. His mother knows me, his friends know me. And you? You're just a temporary arrangement. Florence's lips parted, her voice trembling. Maybe it started that way, but it isn't anymore. We love each other. Unji smirked, waving the phone. Do you think anyone will believe that once this gets out? Florence's hands tightened around her back. For the first time, the weight of the secret felt unbearable. Between her love for Ji-ho and the threat hanging over them, she didn't know how much longer their fragile happiness could survive. The rooftop confrontation replayed in Florence's mind like a broken record. Unji's smirk. The photo of the contract. The words that cut deeper than any blade. Do you think anyone will believe you once this gets out? Since then, something in Florence shifted. She laughed less. She dodged Ji-ho's gaze, her smiles shorter, her words clipped. She busied herself with schoolwork, dinners with classmates, errands that stretched later into the evening. At home, she lingered in her study instead of curling up beside him. Ji-ho noticed everything. One night, after she brushed past him with another mumbled excuse, I need to review notes, he finally acted. He cornered her gently in the hallway, his hand pressing softly against the wall beside her. Florence, his voice was low but firm, look at me. Her eyes darted away. I'm fine. No, Ji-ho said, leaning closer, his gaze burning into hers. You're not. You've been shutting me out for days. Did I do something? Did something happen? Florence's lips trembled. She wanted to tell him, to show him the photo Unji had waved in her face, but fear locked her tongue. If his family found out, if the world discovered the truth, Ji-ho's career would crumble. And Unji had made one thing clear, she wouldn't hesitate to ruin them both. I need space, Florence whispered finally, her voice brittle. Ji-ho's chest tightened. He reached for her hand, but she slipped it away, retreating into her room. Alone in the living room, Ji-ho poured himself a drink he didn't touch. He replayed her expression in his mind. Not coldness, but fear. Something was eating her alive, and he swore to find out what. Meanwhile, Unji was busy weaving her own threads. Over tea with Madame Hyjin, she tilted her head innocently, her voice dripping with concern. Florence seems distant lately, doesn't she? She said, stirring her cup with delicate precision. I just hope she's not hiding anything. You know how cruel rumors can be, especially for someone without strong family connections. Madame Hyjin's brow furrowed. The subtle dig wasn't lost on her. Unji continued, her tone light but sharp as a knife. Ji-ho deserves someone who's steady, someone who won't bring him trouble. I worry Florence isn't ready for the weight of this family's name. The words sank in like poison. Though Madame Hyjin had grown warmer toward Florence, doubt now tugged at her heart. What was Florence hiding? Back at home, Florence sat at her desk, staring blankly at her textbooks. Ji-ho's words haunted her. Did something happen? She wanted to confess everything, to let him shoulder the burden with her. But the image of Madame Hyjin's disappointed face stopped her cold. She closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against the desk. Between Ji-ho's growing concern, Unji's manipulations, and the ticking time bomb of the contract photo, Florence felt the fragile walls of their world closing in. And for the first time, she truly wondered, how much longer could she keep this secret from the man she loved? Florence couldn't take it anymore. The sleepless nights, the lies stacking like bricks between her and Ji-ho, the constant fear that one message from Unji could destroy everything. That evening, as rain streaked against the windows once more, she finally broke. Ji-ho had just loosened his tie when he found her sitting at the edge of their bed, her shoulders trembling. Florence, he said softly, but she didn't answer. She only held her phone, the screen still glowing with the cursed photo of their marriage contract. His eyes narrowed. What's this? Her lips parted, her voice breaking. She knows, Ji-ho. Unji, she has everything. She threatened to expose us, to your family, to the press. If she shows them this, they'll believe her, not us. Tears brimmed in her eyes. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to ruin you. For a long moment, silence weighed heavy in the room. Ji-ho took the phone from her, staring at the photo, then at her. Florence braced herself for anger, for disappointment. Instead, his jaw tightened, and his eyes blazed with something else entirely. He cupped her face firmly, forcing her to meet his gaze. You should have told me sooner, he said, his voice low and fierce. Do you think I'd let anyone use this against us? No one touches you. Not Unji. Not anyone. The sheer certainty in his tone shattered her defenses. She sobbed against his chest, clutching his shirt as though it were the only thing keeping her steady. Jiho held her tightly, stroking her hair with a gentleness that belied his fiery words. The next day, Jiho confronted Unji. She was waiting for him at a quiet cafe, her smile smug, her phone resting on the table like a weapon. Jiho, she purred, tilting her head. Finally ready to talk. He sat across from her, expression like steel. I'm here to make one thing clear. Florence is my wife. She's the only woman I'll protect, the only woman I'll choose, now and always. Unji's smile faltered for a split second before she masked it with a laugh. Bold words. But we both know this marriage didn't start with love. Do you think your family, your shareholders, your mother will believe you once I show them this? She tapped her phone lightly. Jiho leaned forward, his tone sharp as glass. Listen carefully, Unji. Whatever we were in the past, it's over. You mean nothing to me now. Nothing. Florence is my future. And if you try to hurt her, you'll have to go through me first. For the first time, Unji's composure cracked. Yet even as her eyes flickered with hurt, her lips curled into that infuriating smirk. We'll see, Jiho. We'll see. As Jiho walked out, leaving Unji in the shadows of her own bitterness, he clenched his fists. The war wasn't over, but one thing was certain. He would fight for Florence, no matter the cost. The Lee family's dining room gleamed under a chandelier of crystal light. Silverware clinked softly as maids moved about, setting steaming dishes of galbaijim and kimchi stew on the long mahogany table. But despite the elegance, Florence's chest felt heavy. She had dreaded this dinner from the moment Unji sent her that chilling text. Jiho, sensing her unease, reached under the table, gently squeezing her hand. His touch was warm, grounding. I'm here, his eyes seemed to say. Across the table, Madame Hygiene observed everything. Her sharp gaze lingered on Florence longer than usual, on how she carefully served soup into Jiho's bowl before her own, on how Jiho leaned in close to whisper something that made Florence's lips curve in a shy smile. For years, Madame Hygiene had doubted. Tonight, she watched. Then Unji arrived. Late, dressed in a sleek black dress that clung to her figure, her lips painted scarlet. Sorry I'm late, she said sweetly, sliding into the empty seat beside Jiho without waiting for approval. The air shifted. Florence, Unji began innocently, her chopsticks tapping the edge of her bowl. It must be difficult, adjusting to life here. After all, Jiho and I share so much history. Florence stiffened. Jiho's jaw tightened. Unji, Madame Hygiene's voice cut in, calm but sharp. Let the girl eat. But Unji only smiled, unfazed. Of course. I just wonder sometimes, do you ever feel like you don't quite fit, Florence? The words were bait. Florence lowered her gaze, lips pressed together. Before she could respond, Jiho's voice rang firm. She fits because she's my wife. That's all that matters. The room went still. Jiho rarely raised his voice at family gatherings, but his conviction shook even Madame Hygiene. His hand remained over Florence's, refusing to let go. A flicker of something unreadable passed over Madame Hygiene's face. She turned her gaze to Florence, and for the first time, there wasn't suspicion, but thoughtfulness. Dinner continued, but tension simmered. Unji tried again, dropping subtle remarks, hinting at Florence's secrets, letting her hand brush Jiho's a little too long when passing a dish. But instead of drawing Jiho closer, it only made his rejection clearer. His eyes never left Florence. His defenses stayed firm. When the meal ended, Florence excused herself to the balcony, needing air. The city stretched below, glittering with night lights. She gripped the railing, her heart pounding with the weight of secrets and threats. Jiho followed minutes later, draping his jacket over her shoulders. Don't let her get to you, he murmured. Whatever game she's playing, we'll face it together. Florence looked up at him, eyes brimming. For the first time in weeks, Her guard slipped. Ji-ho, what if she ruins everything? He tilted her chin gently, his gaze steady and unwavering. She won't. I won't let her. Their breath mingled in the cool night air. For one suspended moment, the noise of the world faded, only the two of them existed. And as Ji-ho leaned closer, their lips brushed, tender yet charged, sealing a vow neither dared to voice aloud. But from inside the house, unseen, Eun-ji's eyes burned as she watched them. Her hand tightened around her phone. The war was only beginning. The Lee residence buzzed with quiet tension the following weekend. A family brunch had been arranged, Madame Hyjin's idea. Florence dressed carefully that morning, her pale blue hanbok skirt flowing gracefully as she adjusted her ribbon tie. Yet her hands trembled. She knew Eun-ji wouldn't waste this chance. Ji-ho noticed, stepping behind her as she stood before the mirror. His reflection appeared beside hers, eyes warm and unshakable. Whatever happens today, he said, smoothing the ribbon with steady fingers, don't forget, you're my wife. Nothing changes that. Florence managed a faint smile. His words were her armor. The dining hall brimmed with relatives and close family friends. Madame Hyjin presided at the head of the table, regal in her navy silk dress. Ji-ho sat beside Florence, his posture protective, his gaze cold whenever Eun-ji looked their way. Halfway through the meal, Eun-ji made her move. She placed her phone on the table with deliberate care, the screen lighting up. A photo glared back at them. The contract. Gasps rippled across the table. Florence's face drained of color. She could barely breathe. What's this? One of the uncles demanded. A contract. Marriage terms. Eun-ji's smile was a blade. It seems not everything is as it appears. Florence isn't here out of love. She's here because of this. Florence's throat burned. Every eye turned to her, waiting for her to crumble. But before she could speak, Ji-ho's hand shot out, snatching the phone and locking the screen. That's enough, he said sharply, his voice echoing through the hall. Eun-ji leaned forward. Ji-ho, don't protect her. Everyone deserves to know the truth. Ji-ho stood, his chair scraping back. The truth. His voice thundered. The truth is this. Yes, it started as an arrangement. But it's real now. More real than anything I've ever known. Florence is my wife. She's the woman I love. And no piece of paper, no scheme of yours, will ever change that. The room fell into stunned silence. Florence's heart pounded, her vision blurring with tears. She hadn't expected him to bare his soul so openly. Not here, not like this. Eun-ji's lips trembled, but she forced a laugh. You're blinded, Ji-ho. Everyone knows I'm the one who belongs by your side. Your mother, your friends. Enough. Madame Hyjin's voice sliced through the air like steel. All eyes turned to her. She rose slowly, her gaze locked on Eun-ji. Ji-ho has already chosen, she said firmly. And watching him today, I see it clearly. He has found someone who steadies him, someone who brings light into his life. If you can't respect that, Eun-ji, then perhaps you never truly loved him. Shock rippled around the table. Eun-ji froze, her mask cracking for the first time. Madam, she whispered, but no plea could soften the ice in Hyjin's tone. Leave, Madame Hyjin said coldly. Eun-ji's chair scraped back, her pride the only thing keeping her from collapsing as she stormed out. When the room emptied, Ji-ho turned to Florence, his hand cupping her face. You don't have to be afraid anymore, he murmured. Florence's tears spilled freely. I thought I would lose everything. You'll never lose me, he said, pressing his forehead to hers. And there, in the golden glow of the dining room, with Madame Hyjin watching silently but no longer with suspicion, Ji-ho kissed her, not as part of an arrangement, but as a vow of love witnessed by all. Thanks for staying with us to watch Florence and Ji-ho's story. Which moment made your heart race the most? Tell us in the comments. If you want more dramatic K-drama stories filled with love, secrets, and suspense, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you never miss an episode when it drops. See you next time.